The first question was from Stuart, and he wants to know if the Dunston chestnuts thrive on trellis, like the Belgian fruiting wall.
Did you say on the trellis?
Yeah, on a trellis.
Well, the Dunston chestnut is a story. It's a pretty cool story. There was a hunter, I think he was in Ohio, who found an American chestnut tree, like a huge one, in the woods that was healthy, and he collected some of the nuts from it, and then he raised those trees, and for some reason he crossed them with a Chinese chestnut and created this Dunston chestnut tree and started it. And then he moved to Florida and he started a nursery down there, and that's where the Dunston chestnuts come from. And they are a pretty big standard tree. Like, they are one of the larger varieties of chestnut. I'm not sure why or how you would trellis them. They're a really strong timber type chestnut with a big healthy nut.
Next question we got here is Roy. Roy says, does that 4,000-year-old chestnut suffer from blight?
Not that I've heard. I've heard it is pretty healthy and still cranks out nuts every year. I've never seen it, but it's called the 100-horse chestnut, and the reason it has that name is because in about 1514, something like that, in the year 1500s, there was a princess traveling with an entourage, and she got caught in this huge thunderstorm, and she had 100 horsemen with her, and they all took shelter under this one tree. And apparently it's still healthy today.
Awesome. Now, John wants to know is, will the chestnut grow in zone 9, like Central Florida, in sandy type soils? And I would like to elaborate and say, what zones will it grow in?
That's a really good question. And so if you think about like the beginning of the presentation, I talked about all the different species of chestnut found around the world. And there's some in southern China. There are definitely people growing chestnuts in Florida, like the Dunston chestnut, for example, the whole nursery. I think they're in northern Florida, though. So the long answer, I should just say like numbers, right? But there's so many variables. The American chestnut, I'm pretty sure it could handle like a zone 3. But the Chinese chestnut, it's like zone 5 or 6. And then the hybrids, each seed is going to make a different tree representing different parts of the genome. So it's pretty tough to know. And there's so much experimentation that has not occurred. Like, people have put all this work into corn, but they haven't put as much work into chestnuts. And I think if you're in like the middle part of the country, like if you live anywhere between, Maine and North Florida, I think you're pretty safe. I think it might be tough in some of the mountainous regions. But I know, what's that guy, Mark Shepard, he grows chestnuts and he's had negative 50 degrees. So I know they're super cold hardy. And as far as heat goes, I don't think they would, I could be wrong, but I don't think they would do that well in the full tropics. But I think they could do fine in the subtropics. But I think it takes some experimentation. All right.
Roy asks, have you visited the American Chestnut Research and Restoration Center at the SUNY ESF? Now, for those that don't know, SUNY ESF is the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry. He says they're doing some amazing work through a slight genetic modification to one gene in order to make it blight resistant.
Yeah, so that's a really, that's like a whole other presentation. So what they're doing up there is they're taking one isolated gene out of wheat. They take a wheat plant and they took a part of it and they're putting it into a chestnut tree. And this gene resists the chestnut blight fungus. And it's not, there's so many, it's genetic engineering. So there's like this whole debate. I don't know that much about genetic engineering. I know that it kind of freaks me out personally, on a personal level, and I know that I want to sell my chestnuts to the local population, and I don't want to have to, I want to be able to say to people, these are GMO-free organic chestnuts, to be able to sell them. So I'm not interested in that tree. The other thing is, I think it's cool that they're doing it. It's like really interesting, but I think the way they're doing it is very bizarre. So instead of taking these trees, inserting the gene, and then growing out the nuts, They're taking the tree, and then when they grow the tree out, they grow them with tissue culture in growth chambers, so the trees receive 24 hours of sunlight, 365 days a year, and they're trying to get the trees to flower in one season. So they're in like this weird rush, and they use a ton of energy, and I don't understand why they can't just use a nursery bed. So I think that part's really weird, and I don't know very much about genetic engineering other than I'm never going to do it here.
Yeah, so your best alternative to that, or what you see as the best solution to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, would be to grow out the species and pick and choose the blight resistant
Right.
nuts.
Well, the American Chestnut Foundation is already doing that, and my goal is to just make healthy trees that build ecosystems. But the American Chestnut Foundation is to restore the actual American chestnut. They're not interested in like the Chinese chestnut or the Japanese. They just want a healthy American, and they've been doing it through traditional breeding. So they have trees that are 95% American and 4 or 5% Chinese, and those trees are coming out right now. They're available, but they're super expensive. It's like $100 for a nut, and they're finding those trees are mostly blight resistant and exhibit fully American traits. So that would be an alternative to the genetic engineering, and it's expensive, but it is available. The genetic engineering is not available, and then the other flip side of that is people say, well, I know it's 5% Chinese. That's way more than the one wheat gene. But if you look at the genome of the Chinese chestnut, it's very similar to the genome of the American chestnut. They share enough genes that it's actually about the same amount of genetic difference as the transgenic tree.
Yeah, and my big issues with the GMO side of it is the patenting. Like if they're going to patent this seed,
Right.
and not allow other people to have it, or they'll patent it so that it dies after a certain amount of years, or they'll GMO it so that it does that. That's the kind of things that I worry about. And now, if the patent system didn't exist, I think I'd be fine with the GMO, in that I could take that seed and reproduce whatever I wanted with that. And but yeah, as far as selling it, it's much more sellable of a product if you can label it as a non-GMO product. So
Yeah.
there are alternative solutions that we should really be investigating. But yeah, there are some amazing things that GMO has the potential to do, and I think it'd be much more amazing if there wasn't a patent system involved. Of course, then that takes out the incentive of spending all of this money and research into the GMO.
Well, it's all government money anyways.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just, I don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
All right, so that was, I want to say that Roy asked that question, and so did Nicholas. It was very similar. So I hope Nicholas got the answer he was looking for as well. Casey asks, when you start seeds in the air pruning beds, how close do you space them, and how long do you leave them? Is the density species specific? Is the length of time left in the bed based on a certain number of leaf sets, or is it a desired height reached before potting and placing them into a bed?
So I try to never pot chestnuts, by the way. I sometimes do if I just have extra, but I don't like doing it. It disfigures the root system. And I always transplant chestnuts. They all come out of all the beds at the same time, which is as soon as the leaves drop. When the leaves turn, they don't actually drop. They're kind of like beech trees. They just have a brown leaf for a while. When they go dormant, I pull them right out of the air prune bed or out of the nursery bed. Is the only time I do it. I don't move them when they're leafed out because they just hate it. They always hate it. So I wait until it's around November here, and then the spacing, I space the nuts about an inch apart, and just in a grid in that whole air prune bed. And then the nursery beds, same thing. They're just like 1 or 2 inches apart, and they seem to do fine with it.
All right, and so is it the first year that you
Yeah.
just it's 1 year and then you move
Yeah.
on?
They're out of there after a year. I don't like to, if I leave them in the same spot for 2 years, they get really hard to dig because deeper down, I have a lot of rocks in the soil and I'll just damage the heck out of a 2-year-old tree. Because if they grow 3 feet the first year, I would be scared to see what they would do in 2 years and then try to dig them out safely and actually not destroy them.
Now, do they have a major taproot?
It's weird. Some of them will have just a pure taproot, but most of them will have like a heart root. It'll be like 5 strong roots coming out in like this kind of shape. And the air prune bed, I think, makes it so nobody has a taproot.
And have you experimented with exposing the roots for like your sick trees? Just exposing the root system in an established tree?
What do you mean exposing the roots for what purpose?
Well, you dig them up and expose like the top half of the root. Some people say that can really improve the health of the tree if one gets sick.
I never heard of it.
Okay. All right. So Nicholas asks, where would you recommend that a beginner go for blight-resistant, heavy-yielding cultivars, seedlings, seeds, etc.?
Well, it's really hard not to recommend myself. So I would say Twisted Tree Farm, and then you can also check out Empire Chestnut Company. They sell seed as well. I do sell seed, but Empire Chestnut Company has seed, and then you can join the American Chestnut Foundation, and you'll get all kinds of resources of other growers. But I also go on the internet. There's like the Northern Nut Growers Association, and you just get in there, and there are so many old guys that have been growing these great trees for like 50 years would love to send you seeds. And that's what I've done. And I have contacted the Connecticut Agricultural Station for seed. I've contacted everyone I could think of, and I've got a tremendous genetic collection on my hillside now. So I think it's, even if you get seeds from me, you should still get seeds from other places too, and mix it all up. But me and Empire Chestnut are the two that sell seed. And then you could try Badger Set Research Corporation. They just sell little tiny trees, but they have great genetics.
And would you say that it's very important, or maybe the first place to look would be local, or maybe the same zone at least?
Yeah, I don't know if that matters, because so like the seeds I'm growing, yes, they're local, but those trees, if you go back in time through their grandparents and great grandparents, they came from China and Japan and Korea and Italy and all kinds of places anyways from all over the world. But if you're just planting a few trees and you don't want to have lots of dieback if you're in a cold region, then don't just start with, just get a handful of trees from some guy in South Carolina, But I usually try to get stuff from people that I know are other northern growers. It's already, that part's at least proven.
And when you're raising your trees, do you do kind of like the stun method that Mark Shepard talks about, where it's just sheer total utter neglect, whatever survives?
No, because then they lose everything. They do. Like I tried that. I read the Restoration Agriculture, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. And the more I neglect my trees, the more they die. And when trees are 1 or 2 years old, they really need help, I think. And if you look at nature, nature does stun technique, except instead of planting 100 chestnuts or 1,000, nature might plant 2 million, and then one tree only has to reproduce itself one time in its whole life to continue the same population. So if red oak, for example, makes 30,000 acorns in a year, 100 times, and only has to reproduce itself once to keep that population going. I'm not messing around with numbers like that. So I do minimal weed control. If it's super dry, I'll do my best to get water up there. I definitely protect from voles. I definitely protect from deer. I've planted rows of chestnuts with no protection and had voles go down and kill every single tree. So I'm not into that. But it's cool if it works for someone else. Sounds fun.
Do you use any sprays like a compost tea or any kind of spray on the trees?
No, I definitely don't have time to do that. I when I get up to take care of the trees, it's like vole guards go on, deer guards, and then if there's extra time, we might like cut back some of the grass that's growing inside the cage, and that's about it.
Okay. Let's see here. So Eric asks, and I think he's looking for a little more detail in the milling process. What's the milling process for making
Oh, it's really easy. All you do is you shell the nut. You have a kernel. It's a dried kernel, and then a corn grinder is like $20 on eBay or something, and it's just like a hand crank. That's the cheapest one. I'm gonna buy a really nice flour mill this year. I hope if I can get the money together. But a corn grinder they're like $20, and it's like a funnel at the top. You drop the dried kernels in, and then you go like that, and then the flour comes out, and that's it. It's really easy.
And you said you were going to be investing in a nicer one. What are you looking at to invest in?
I've been looking at this one for like 3 years. It's a company, I think it's called Pleasant Hill Grain Supply, and they sell one that easily hooks to a exercise bike, and it's actually in the description they say works great for chestnut flour, and it's it's like a really high quality mill. I think it's like $600. But we can harvest 1,000 pounds of chestnuts every year, and I think it'd be really great to have. But it all depends on if I want to spend $600. I'm a pretty cheap person.
Good way to get the kids to burn off some energy too, right?
Yeah, put them on the bike. There's mechanized ones with a motor, for like 2,000 or 3,000. But
right.
Yeah.
Okay, and what would you say the grain that's produced by these chestnuts? What's it closest to in like a cooking? What would you like substitute?
It's just like corn flour. Like if you ever have a cornmeal, it's just like cornmeal, and you can have it coarser or finer. Except cornmeal it almost has no flavor. Cornmeal, chestnut flour, it's just like that, except it's really sweet. It's totally sweet. It's almost like it's so sweet that that is great for desserts. But it's still good as just a bread by itself. But it is just like corn, I think.
All right, and on Twisted Tree Farm, what can we buy from Twisted Tree? You're not just chestnuts, right?
Right, chestnuts is I probably have like 200 varieties of plants. So I do chestnut, hazelnut, mulberry, persimmon. I'll do a ton of apples, plums, pears, and then we do a lot of like the small fruits. We do blueberries, grapes, currants. It's hard to think of everything right now, and then we've got a lot of perennials that are going to come online this year. So I put my fall inventory online by September, and then we start taking orders for shipping. And the perennials, it's almost all medicinal or edible perennials. Like we do like tons of rhubarb. I do like thousands of dollars worth of comfrey every year, and it's an ever expanding collection. I started doing a lot of hascaps this year, and speaking of patents, it's really tough to figure out which ones are patented and which ones aren't. But that's a great plant, and it's so fun to grow. It's so easy.
Last question I got here is from Dimitri, and he says he's got a big Chinese tree on his land 2 hours east from where your farm is, and only one every year. He gets empty husks with a shriveled nut.
Yeah.
Only once in one has he seen a nut inside of it, and it tasted pretty good, and he's wondering if it's a pollination problem.
It's definitely pollination. I've seen that lots of times where somebody just has one chestnut tree. They will not accept their own pollen. They're like total. This is a tree that wants friends. Like it wants genetic diversity built up, and you have to have at least 2 trees for pollination, and I think the more the better.
All right. Well, thank you once again, Akiva, for joining us. It's been a wealth of information. That was awesome. Will you, if someone wants to ask additional questions, where can they do that? Would you answer questions from our event page, or would you rather people go to your website to ask the questions? What's the best way to ask questions?
Well, I check my email every day, and I don't know when I would check the event page, but it's just an honest answer. So people ask me questions about trees all the time, and I love it. I get all kinds of emails that aren't interesting, and whenever I get one that's a question about trees, it's great, and I appreciate people having discussions about growing trees. And so if you just go look up Twisted Tree Farm, find our website, go to the contact page, you can ask me anything, and I'll give you my best answer I got. So.
What are some of the best resources you would recommend to people? What do you use to go for like community discussion forums, things like that you use?
Well, I do a lot of tree identification walks in the woods for like different plant societies and garden clubs, and that's a really great way I have met people. And then I would like it if other people did this. I don't know of anyone doing it. There probably is somewhere, but we do a festival every year, and it's called the Nut Bonanza, and it's totally free. We just ask people to bring some food to share, and we set up stations, and it's like a huge party. We have like a big biochar fire, and then there's chestnut roasting. We do acorn flour making. We do walnut shelling. Hazelnut oil, we have like a little hand crank oil press, and so it's just like a super hands-on event that we created, and it's just so fun to like see people get together. There's always tons of kids there, and so much food, and just people are like celebrating the gifts of these trees. We do it in the autumn when there is all these gifts laying all over the place. I think I would love to see more people make basically like a tree crops festival and just celebrate this incredible bounty. Most of the time, like black walnuts are just lying on the side of the road. There's wild apples all over the place. Nobody picks them up. I'd like to see people just picking this stuff up and bringing it to a big party. Yeah, so I think creating your own party is a great idea.
Yeah, and building community is very important. That's a great way to build community, strong community. All right, well, thank you so much for being with us today, Akiva, for the wealth of information. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Josiah.